So I've got some data that we took at the Whitewater Nature Preserve north of campus, the prairie community there. In the spreadsheet behind, I've taken the survey points starting at the uphill location, heading downhill at 10-meter intervals. A through P, I've just called them. And then I started with a species list, which was very handy to have at the start. And for every location, I took handwritten notes in the field, but then I committed them to this electronic document. And you can see some patterns emerging already. Where some of these species are found, the quadrats toward the left would be more upland sites. So this is Helianthus, a sunflower, Poa pratensis, this is a grass, found really only in these upland sites close to the ridge. Then we have a couple of species, so Phalaris aruninacea, this is the reed canary grass, and of course the cattail down there. Some of these are only found toward the wetlands, and then some are found basically throughout. Some are more dominant, you can see just by looking at this. So one of our goldenrods, Canada goldenrod, Solidago canadensis, pretty common throughout. And so we can use these numbers to see how the habitat changes over space as we move up towards down the hill. Maybe I'll just enter in a couple of quadrats worth of data and just kind of see how the features change as we go along. And on here, I don't think we have a wetland calculator. I'll have to change that and maybe give you guys a file we can use for that. So this is a really handy spreadsheet, just all in one really useful spreadsheet provided by the Wisconsin DNR. Notice it's dated 2016. Plant species don't change really on, the more of a decade change in the kinds of species we find in the state, or at least that's kind of the rate that things get updated. So one of the sheets on this spreadsheet, it's got lots of sheets attached, has these codes and then scientific names and common names. Common names, not too bad if you want to communicate with people. They're probably more familiar with these names. I tend to I've come to memorize my plants as scientific names. So I'm always sometimes a little playing catch up as far as common names. So also on this spreadsheet, the C value, the coefficient of conservatism from 0, typically found in waste areas and not indicative of natural areas. All the way up to 10 would be plants that are found exclusively in really pristine, undisturbed areas. Here's our wetland categories: native status, native versus introduced, growth form, trees and herbaceous plants, and then some of these, if they have some kind of state designation, threatened or special concern, and so on. So lots of information there, and the spreadsheet we're going to enter data into references these codes. So the codes are based on the scientific name. So Adiantum pedatum here has the ADI for the genus name, PED for the species name. And some of these, just because there are only so many letter combinations, see if I can find any. Here's one. Some of these letter combinations are not unique. So 2 species in the genus Bidens, Bidens aristosa, that's not useful. Those are the same species. All right, here's one. Nope, maybe the same thing. All right, not as many ones as I thought. Okay, the whole fucking system's changed. Okay, so moving from that list of species, we can go over to, there's lots of information in here. Every year that these get put out, they're an update to a previous list. So some of these, if you're already familiar with scientific names, sometimes those get updated. That's the name changes tab. The guide here, pretty intense set of information for how to fill this sheet out. Some of this is going to overlap with what we cover in the course. Some of it we won't cover in the same way. But it's all going to be useful features. If you end up working with the Wisconsin DNR, this would be something you would become familiar with. Summary benchmarks for classifying habitats. And then finally, the sheet we're going to use, this calculator sheet. Very handy. It's going to look up plants from the other sheet and bring over their information. So if you go through these areas in red, kind of indicate where you should be entering your data. You can enter in and you'll see it'll give you a list of options. So ACH, MIL, those are the first three of the genus and the species for Achillea millefolium. And we're going to give it a shot, just kind of see if that lines up right. And sure enough, it pulls over the scientific name. So you want to, of course, confirm that you're entering the right thing, and then percent cover. So I'll just go through the list. The ones that have data for A, we'll fill those in. Helianthus pauciflorus at 20. Check the scientific name. Med loop 1%. Poa pratensis 50%. Rudbeckia hirta 2%. Solidago canadensis 5%. And Solidago rigida 20%. So as it mentions in the notes, the percentages can exceed 100%. Plants are not growing completely in isolation. Sometimes they grow over each other. And I just did a pretty simple ballpark. These would be closer to number of individuals than necessarily percent cover. But it's kind of giving you a weighted percentage of how many are there. So we've got our scientific names, and then the common names get pulled in too. These are handy. Kentucky bluegrass, black-eyed Susan. Useful names to know. I just tend not to emphasize them in our course. Then we got here the C value. It's getting trimmed a little bit, but that says C value. And we can just kind of take an eyeball at our how special the plants are that are found there. So not too special, plants of typically waste areas and so on. Two of these are actually introduced species, so black medic and Kentucky bluegrass. Introduced species, and they're not going to really contribute to they're not going to positively contribute to the calculation of C value here. So kind of middle of the road species, nothing too particularly special. Now that we've entered in our data, the complete data for this quadrat, you can see some of these are filled in. Floristic quality metrics, so FQI, floristic quality index, looking only at the native species, got some numbers here. So quality index of 8, you've got to get familiar with the range that those would fall into. Weighted is weighted by abundance, so the FQI gives you basically just the presence of species and figures out how special the habitat is that way. C value, weighted mean C value, so calculate simply the mean of these values. And then we could calculate, I guess here we've got growth forms. So any that are aquatic, they're not indicated here, but not too surprising, at the top of a ridge, we wouldn't run into aquatic plants. So just for the purpose of our exercise here, I'm going to jump ahead and do one that's a little more middle of the habitat. So Baptisia alba. Was it one individual? This one might be trouble. Maybe not. Eusthamia graminifolia. Great, that name comes in. Only one of those. Monarda fistulosa, 20. Phalaris arenanacea, 5. Solidago canadensis, 20. And some, oh wow, nice update, friends. All right, so we're not up to 100%. I think that's going to let it slide there. So our herbaceous plants total to 57%. I actually recorded these as just number of individuals, so that might skew the references a little bit. So floristic quality, pretty similar to what we had before. I didn't highlight the wetness values previously. Kind of similar here, so lots of facultative, so facultative upland, facultative wetland, plants that are generally not found in wetlands, but facultative upland can be, but usually found in uplands. These can be and maybe more often found in wetlands. If we calculated up our wetness value, this might be increasing. One plant that has pretty strong conservatism value, other ones not too special there either. This is a planted prairie, so it might have skewed numbers all around anyway. All right, so let's go maybe farther down. All right, we're going to do the last one before we got to the really single species zone. Opossum cannabinum, one individual. Asclepias syriaca, two individuals. Phalaris rundinacea, 50 individuals. Salcan, 10 individuals. And Traohai, 5 individuals. All right, so low conservatism values. Still strongly facultative. Even our reed canary grass, which I think of as a wetland plant, still a facultative plant. That's just an aggressive plant all around, so maybe not too surprising that it makes its way into wetlands and also can grow away from wetlands. And our floristic quality numbers are dropping a little bit. We were up at 8 and now we're down to 5. Not too surprising, the diversity goes down, and then the quality index numbers of these are also going down